There are reports in the Times of London that British cabinet ministers are set to tell the Prime Minister Keir Starmer that, quote, his time is up, to set a timetable for his departure and an orderly transition. There's been no confirmation that these talks have taken place yet in Downing Street. Events, dear events, is the quote attributed to the late British Prime Minister Harold Macmillan when asked what is likely to blow a government off course. That event that's creating a lot of howling wind around Keir Starmer right now is what's just happened 173 miles north in the constituency of Makerfield near Wigan. Once synonymous for pie-eating contest, Northern Soul and Rugby League. It may go down in history as the election that paved the way for a future Prime Minister. This man, Andy Burnham, the former Mayor of Manchester, who's talked about change needed for the UK. His reasons for entering the by-election appear tied to the task of becoming the Prime Minister, again to challenge Keir Starmer. And he gave his pitch to be the PM this afternoon, but he didn't declare the race underway.
This election result has opened up the possibility that we can now move forward together towards that future.
To that future, well, this is the future that the Prime Minister Keir Starmer envisions. He responded a short while after.
There isn't a leadership contest.
But when there is,
at
it's
the
imminent,
moment,
Prime Minister,
there
isn't
isn't one at the moment. But as I've said on many, many occasions, I don't think that's a good thing for the country to plunge us into chaos. I would also add that now that Andy has won, which is really important, really good, he's a huge asset to us, then now will inevitably be a Manchester mayoralty by-election starting straight away. So it's important that we pull together for that. But if there is a contest, just to be clear with you, then yes, I will run, I will stand, and I've said repeatedly, I'm not going to walk away from that.
Let's speak to the former special advisor in the governments of Tony Blair and Gordon Brown. Paul Richards is on the programme, author of How to Win an Election. It's good to hear your thoughts today and how to be a spin doctor as well. Welcome back to France 24, Paul.
Hello, thank you very much for having me.
What happens next?
Well, it's very hard to tell. It's very, very fluid, and lots of members of parliament are WhatsApping each other, phoning each other, looking to see what others are doing. And it's mostly now behind the scenes, but may well break into the public view over the weekend. So anybody that wants to stand as a leader of the Labour Party, who's a member of parliament, has to get 81 of their colleagues to put them, to issue their support publicly. We are told Andy Burnham has those names. Other names that may be in the frame include Wes Streeting. He says he has the names. Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister, you see there on your screens. Of course, he will be on the ballot automatically because he is the leader. And other names may come forward too, which means we may get a contest, which will go out to the party members to vote over the summer, or it could be a deal behind the scenes, a so-called coronation, where one candidate emerges without the need for a contest, and everyone just carries on as though nothing has happened. The Labour Party's history, however, you will know, is not of coronation. Usually it is of contest and a long drawn-out row.
While we're on air, Paul, according to Reuters, and according to the Financial Times, the British Transport Minister, Cabinet member Heidi Alexander, has called on the Prime Minister Keir Starmer to set a timetable for his departure. What do you make of that? And also, if you were advising Sir Keir right now, what would you say to him?
Well, we knew Heidi Alexander was somebody who is sort of demanding a clarity of timetable. And the argument from her is that this is very destabilising for the governance of Britain. It's not good for our place in the world stage. And we need just to get on with whatever's going to happen needs to happen quickly. My advice to Keir Starmer is that he was elected only 2 years ago on a 4.5-year, 5-year prospectus to govern the country. And he has a strong argument that says he hasn't finished his mandate. We don't elect presidents in this country, in the UK. He was elected to be a member of parliament and then chosen to be the Prime Minister. And he's got a mandate to carry on. So you can easily take that to the country and say, look, let me carry on doing the job. Things are starting to improve in the economy. He can point to his reforms and so on and say, I'm still the man for the job. And there are lots of Labour Party members, I have to say, speaking to the Labour Party members this morning, people are saying, well, he's been treated very unfairly, actually, and that, people shouldn't be trying to tear him down. He was elected on the promise of stability. and the idea that swapping prime ministers every few months was something that was our opponents did. The Conservative Party did that, and this was supposed to be a period of stability and economic growth and stability on the world stage too. So he could make that argument, and I think it's very hard to say. He is extremely tough. I mean, we know that he is somebody absolutely dedicated to this task. And so far, the briefing is very strongly he will fight and he will win. He's got a war chest of money to fight an election inside the Labour Party. He's got a kind of phalanx, a Praetorian guard of supporters around him. That may evaporate, but right now he's in a fairly strong position. So he goes automatically forward to the ballot.
Evaporate is a good word, because you'll know, and you'll have watched, about how this plays out on television, on social media, the optics of all of this, what it says to the nation when we see this Andy Burnham appearing on the ascent with the energy, a plan. And then we see Keir Starmer. I heard it mentioned by one commentator that it felt like the power was draining from him at the G7 this week. I want you to take a look at this, Paul. This was the moment, you might have seen it, where Emmanuel Macron is gathering the leaders. And ask yourself the question, would this have happened to President Trump? This is the what happened next round.
But with Keir, we wait for him? Are you sure? Thank you, Jonathan. Okay. Thank you. Just tournez-vous 2 secondes. Regardez les derrière. May, could you have a look to these guys?
So we have the optics of an empty chair, and it's reported President Trump had little time for him, that he requested a bilateral with the US president. All of that plays in, doesn't it, when it comes to voters' choices, the personality politics of power.
Yes, I mean, an empty chair is never a good look, isn't it? And that is embarrassing. And I'm sure there was some mere administrative reason for that. I mean, Keir Starmer is actually quite respected on the world stage. I think that particularly in relation to Ukraine and rearmament, he has had some success and is respected on the world stage. But you're right, of course, that support for a political leader is determined by their ability to be successful. And people want to be associated with success. It's not a personality contest, and therefore, if it looks like support is ebbing away from him, that drip becomes a flood, and it could well be that the tectonic plates shift very rapidly over the weekend. And Andy Burnham won his by-election with a very clear result. And his argument was, look, I can beat these right-wing populists, this party called Reform UK. I can beat them. And he has done that in this local election, this by-election on Thursday. His argument now is, well, I can do that nationally. I can take them on. And MPs, members of parliament, who are elected by these constituencies, who have reform candidates breathing down their necks, may well say, well, I don't agree with his policies necessarily, but if he can get me over the line, get me re-elected at the next general election for another 5 years, then he's our guy. And that's when the shift will occur. So as I began the interview by saying, it's very fluid and very hard to tell what's going to happen next. I mean, that remains true because it is lots of moving parts. And Andy Burnham may well be the next Prime Minister. But, one thing we've learned from politics, isn't it, that it's just very hard to predict. It's extremely unpredictable at times, and the Labour Party is especially hard to predict. So, yes, more likely than not, but who knows?
And also, the point is that it seems that those around Andy Burnham suggest that he is the secret sauce. He is what the country needs. He has a vision. And yet there's an old joke that goes around. I heard it told by Labour insiders this morning, that there's a Corbynite, a Brownite, a Blairite. They go into the pub and the barman says, "What can I get you, Andy Burnham?" That people don't understand his vision, that he can say anything right now. It's all shiny and new. And yet it's not. As you know, he was a minister both for Brown and for Blair.
I'll show you something from my shelf. This is from the election campaign, okay? And that was the Labour poster. It says, "Vote Andy for us." And then a cartoon head of Andy Burnham. Now, there's no Labour branding on that at all, but there's no politics in that, is there? There's no slogan, there's no political offer. That was a campaign built around the personality of Andy Burnham as the mayor of Manchester. Can you replicate that? across 650 constituencies, without some policy, without some actual retail offer, some sense of what the economy is going to look like, what it's going to mean for your kids' future? Of course not. So he is going to have to start articulating a policy platform. And the minute you do that, you lose parts of your coalition. You start to disappoint people that want you to go further or faster, or people that don't want you to lurch off to the left. And he's going to have to shed some of his support and decide which side he is on. So, there's a number of big issues coming up where he's going to have to disappoint folk and build a policy program. His own advisors are saying go now, some of them, because there's never been a better time. We could go straight with the momentum of this by-election win. And others are saying, well, wait and build up your support by putting policies out there that people can understand and so on. And that's why I think we need an election contest so we can test those policies if we get that far. And the other little wild card is, of course, now he's elected as a member of parliament, he has to relinquish his position as mayor of Greater Manchester. Which means we have to have another by-election for the mayor of Greater Manchester. The Labour Party will be very reluctant to see that fall into the hands of the far right or the ultra-right or any other kind of right. And so they will want to see that win. So the argument then is, well, he should wait before launching any kind of chaos of a leadership bid until that election on the 30th of July has been fought and won. So there's lots of moving parts.
If you're sitting in the Chancellery in Berlin or here at the Elysee advising President Macron or Friedrich Merz, the Chancellor, who, stepping back from this, Paul, do you think is a better Prime Minister for Europe? Is it Keir Starmer? Is it Andy Burnham? Is it Wes Streeting?
Well, the Labour Party sort of broadly settled the question of us being in favour of greater European integration. Where
I don't just mean post-Brexit, though, Paul. I mean as a leader in Europe, who's involved in these negotiations, like at the table at G7 on Ukraine. Who's a better leader for Europe?
Well, I mean, the obvious answer to that is, of course, Keir Starmer, because he's experienced on that world stage. And we have a silly system in the UK that if you've been the Prime Minister, it tends to mean that's the end of your political career. Only once recently has a Prime Minister then come back, and that was David Cameron, who came back as Foreign Secretary. So some people are saying, well, maybe Keir Starmer would be better suited as Foreign Secretary. And he has sort of sideways move, and that frees up the prime ministership for somebody else, and maybe a deal might be struck. I mean, that's not how we tend to do things here, but it may make some sense. The other two, I mean, Wes and Andy Burnham, they have made their pronouncements, but I've never seen a big, detailed foreign policy speech from either of them. And if you study their writings and the things they've said, they're not necessarily tested yet on that global stage. So right now, of the contenders, the Prime Minister is the one with the global reach.
Perhaps we need Thomas Tuchel right now. He might do a job all the England fans think he could probably do a better job right now. Let me ask your thought as well, because you knew Gordon Brown. He's enjoying himself at the World Cup this week. It was famously quoted that he was different privately to publicly. He was dour and stern, but he had a great sense of humour. Is the Keir Starmer different in private than he comes across in public?
Definitely, yes. And there's an interesting facet of that, which is not only the sort of public and the private difference, but also when Gordon Brown left office, he became a noticeably different person, liberated from the weight of office and more able to pursue the policies and the interests that he had. And Tony Blair too. Don't forget, Tony Blair stepped down as Prime Minister because at the point at which he felt it looked so bad, the public would never forgive Labour, and so he gave over to Gordon Brown in 2007. So he's had a fantastic career since being Prime Minister with his Tony Blair Institute and advising all over the world and putting forward ideas. So sometimes there is life beyond politics, isn't there? And people can actually become more of themselves, more satisfied, more happy, and perhaps even more influential once they stop being the Prime Minister and leave number 10 and go off into the world. So who knows?
Very interesting. Always good to talk to you. Thank you, Paul. Thanks for your time tonight.